Hey everyone! If you were ever interested in asking a game designer with 14 years of experience across console and PC projects at Ubisoft, as well as various mobile projects, some questions, well, this is the video series for you. And in this first one, fully unscripted, so expect a lot of ers and pauses, because I'm just like reading this off and answering in real time. Even though I'm recording with barely any editing. I don't even know if this sentence makes sense in the end, but anyway, if you're interested in all that, this series is for you, so let's go. Cornish7 asks 3 questions. The first one is, what's your approach towards difficulty levels? Do you think granulation of it and letting players set everything from the HP to damage of enemies a la Doom the Dark Ages is a good approach? Or do you prefer From Software's one difficulty for creators' intended experience? And of course, why? This is a good one. So, personally speaking, I believe the best approach for difficulty is adaptive difficulty as a default mode, with the possibility to disable it and, set things as hard or easy as you want for people who think they need that. This is game design. There shouldn't be like a strict rule for absolutely everything, and obviously, for example, this doesn't necessarily apply to From Software's games actually, which do have they have like one difficulty, but there's a lot of stuff people can do inside to adjust difficulty for themselves, including asking other players to help them. But that's a special case, I believe. But as a rule of thumb, I believe having adaptive difficulty as a default would be the best in majority of the cases, again with the possibility to disable adaptive difficulty for something concrete for those who want it. I mean, difficulty is an abstract thing. Difficulty is not something concrete. It's the difference between a player's skill to perform a task, any sort of task, be it action or puzzle or anything, or navigation wise, and then the required skill to complete that task. And if the gap is big, then the difficulty is high. If the gap is small, then the difficulty is not that high. So this is why, for absolutely every player, what easy, medium, or hard means for absolutely every game, where it means different things for absolutely every developer, it's such useless in majority of the cases indicator, because the player might select go for, I'm gonna select only medium because it's probably the most balanced experience in every game, but that's also not necessarily the case, and maybe in some games what is defined as hard or easy would be more preferable to them, but they don't know that because they can't know that until they try the game out. And most people play games only once and never replay them again, even if they really love them. So from that perspective, I believe that having an adaptive difficulty as a default that, adapts to players' skills and experience and how they're performing is actually the best way to provide a nice flowy experience for the majority of the players who are, buying the game, want to go through it once, and then, enjoy it, and that's it. And then for everyone else who wants to mess around with something, there will be choices to allow them to, do that. And I think in the majority of the cases, this would be the best approach, even though doing adaptive difficulty correctly is difficult. And one of the things is that you don't really want players to notice that the difficulty is adaptive, because then they can get the feeling of, if I just fail a bunch, the game will become easier. But also, a lot of properly done adaptive difficulties are not as rigid as that. You can't just kill yourself over and over to make things easier. That's easily preventable. That will be my answer. Question 2. Do you think the standardization of control schemes, camera angles, combat systems, etc. in current AAA and a lot of indie market, Metroidvanias for example, is a good or bad thing? I mean, I believe it's a thing. It's neither good nor bad, really. Okay, let's try to break this down. So first, if a popular game has popularized controls that X, A, or B, depending on like your controller, means jump, then, the most advantageous thing to do is, if you have a jump action, is for it to be on the same button, because most people are used to that. So that kind of thing is, usually fine. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is also nothing wrong with, making a game in a similar genre as another game, because a lot of players, want to play similar things. Like, oh, I like this, if there's something similar that I can play. So there's nothing wrong in general with there being more of something similar to something. The things that are sort of wrong, the two things that are wrong, one is this, the tendency to sort of, when something becomes popular, to focus on things that are only that, or mostly that. We all know, I suppose, what are like the most made games of any given genre nowadays, but this keeps changing like every 5 years, because like trends keeps changing, and then everybody suddenly focuses on this, everybody suddenly focuses on this, everybody suddenly focuses on this en masse. And that is sort of like not great, because ultimately you want to make sure that everyone gets to play what they want. And when the industry at large focuses on like something that's popular, that's trendy, then people who like the trendy things, eventually those become not trendy, and then suddenly they have less games to play. But I believe that a more healthy way to do things would be to make sure that everybody has something to play, a healthy choice of something to play. And another thing that is not the best is if you're forcefully trying to adjust like the mechanics or principles of your game to sort of fit the standardized principles, so to speak. Because if you believe that your game needs to have like mechanics or controls or something done a specific way that's against the grain, I think you should do that. For example, Resident Evil 4 on when it was made on GameCube, like by that point in 2005, the twin stick controls for like shooters and stuff like that were already pretty standardized in terms of how you do things. That you aim with the right stick, that you move with the left stick, and in Resident Evil, the controls are very different. You walk and aim with the left stick always. It's just so, because if you want to shoot, you want to stand. The game wants you to stand still. The game wants you to make a choice whether you move or shoot. And then the control scheme is ergonomically set up to make this, comfortable. And modern re-releases of Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 4 and stuff like that, they add as default the modernized control scheme, so to speak. It's like, you move on the left stick, but you aim on the right stick, but when you aim, the left stick is useless, so you don't really do anything with it, and then you have to sort of move your thumb from the right side from the buttons to the stick just while sending a shot. It becomes like this weird and not really comfortable, because for some reason it was decided to bring this to a standard even though it doesn't fit the mechanics. It all really depends on, what is the ultimate experience the game wants players to have. So, yeah. Standardization, it can be fine. It can be not fine depending on the context of your game and your market. Which leads us to the last question. What's one genre that's dead in current market that you would like to see come back? I don't believe that any particular genre is ever truly dead. In a sense that, I remember when adventure games died, for example, point-and-click adventure games. And, that's more of the thing that, they sort of were not really printed and sold in the US, while if you'd live in Europe like I did, you'd have a lot of adventure games to choose from, even though, not all of them were translated into English, but it was still an active genre before its quote-unquote revitalization by Telltale. People now are saying that RTS games are dead, but then you look at all these RTS games that are coming out and some of them that are still really popular and have been for a very long time, and it's like, are they dead? The RTS games didn't die per se, but they didn't become bigger, It's like when you look at some games that have become really huge and they become bigger and bigger and get a larger audience, and then the audience for the RTS games, it sort of stays pretty much the same. But this doesn't mean that, if somebody, that nobody is interested in RTS games, that this is not a market that doesn't have to be served now. It just means that, usually it means that, a lot of big players don't focus on making like high budget games for this market. And, usually that's like a mistaken approach to things. Like before Baldur's Gate 3 recently, a lot of companies had sort of like this tendency to think that players are not interested in RPGs with turn-based battles, that this is not mainstream, that you shouldn't really do that anymore. And then Baldur's Gate 3 became insanely popular. Nah. Question comes from Blue Sign R, or Blue Sign R. Do you think there could be a mathematical way to define depth in games? Something perhaps related to the amount of viable, non-obvious choices at a given moment of time, but more rigorous. Well, there definitely could be a way to do that, but the question would be, should there be a way to do that? In a sense that, there are a lot of useful tools in game design, and calculating the amount of choices to define how much depth you have. Obviously this is possible, but the question then is, what do you do with this information? How do you make sure that the experience is actually engaging? Because just having depth doesn't mean that playing the game is interesting, because besides the possibility of choices and outcomes and stuff like that, there's the questions of clarity, if the choices are interesting, if they are meaningful, if they are comfortable to perform in terms of controls. There's all these questions. And sometimes it is preferable to have a bit of less depth, but with those choices each feeling more meaningful. And again, there's nothing wrong with, trying to do all this stuff to maybe test out your systems. There is an approach that was pretty popular 5 to 10 years ago, which I haven't heard much about now, but I'm sure it's still used, just not as religiously, which was called rational game design and rational level design. The gist of it was that you would define all the various game or level design elements as these concrete building blocks, and then you could see how you could mix and match those blocks to create the sense of flow, to make sure that there's variety in the levels and stuff like that. You would do that usually in an either in an Excel sheet to see, okay, here like I'm using element this, here we have a jump, here we have to slide, here we have, and then you see like the order in which everything happens, and then how much something is used, how much something is not, as an example. And, it is a useful tool to understand if maybe some mechanics are underutilized, or if you do want to add some variety but are not sure how, and you see, okay, well, we were using like these elements, so maybe in these levels we need to use these elements, or we need this system and stuff like that. But then when you get to the actual game, if you just like follow very specifically those processes, these like Excel sheets and stuff like that, very often there is a danger of the game coming out sort of sterile, because even though like there's variety and all should make sense, it may not necessarily be engaging. It's all too calculated. Like, I don't know, like in open world games, there's sort of like a useful not a rule, but a useful principle that, every 40 seconds you should be able to see something or find something to sort of keep the dopamine levels, high for players, so they would keep being engaged. And it's not a useless principle, but again, if you make it the whole game like that, then it becomes too plain, because there's just like, it feels the same. In open world games, sometimes like dead spaces or blank spaces where you don't actually find anything for 40 seconds can feel very meaningful in terms of like experience. If in levels, sometimes if, for example, a whole level centered on jumping around columns instead of like trying to keep like the variety, they're just, this level is fucking about jumping columns. These extremes, they can make things more memorable for players. Sometimes you want to sort of things to be more plain, more smooth. Sometimes you want them to be more extreme. It's, it all depends on what you want to do with the game, really. And I suppose this is a pretty long-winded answer, but ultimately, my point is that everything is potentially a tool, but what players really come out with after playing a game is, like the overall feelings and memories they have from the experience. Even though this experience is like competitive focused and stuff like that, let's take StarCraft as an example. Zerg, Protoss, and Terran. There are 3 races, each provides like a vastly different experience, not just like in terms of balance or numbers, but how it feels to play these races. You don't just like get mechanics like that and like put it in like through design it through a sheet from the get-go. Hope it made sense, what I just said. Yeah, again, this is a very interesting question, so sorry if the answer was a bit too rambly, but too long, didn't listen. Yes, you can do that, but it should be a tool used, carefully. Anyway, I know this has been somewhat rambly, but again, unscripted, and I still hope that you have enjoyed listening to me. And if you ever had questions for a game designer, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you very much.